All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're going to be tackling something pretty interesting. We're going deep on gender distribution in the U.S.
Oh, yeah. This is one of those topics that seems simple at first glance, but gets really complex the more you dig in.
Right, like we all know there are men and women, but how does that balance actually play out across different age groups? Turns out, it's not as straightforward as you might think.
Nope, not at all. And we've got some data here that really paints a fascinating picture of the U.S. population, kind of like a roadmap of how the ratio of men to women changes over time.
Yeah, and we'll be pulling insights from the 2021 American Community Survey data to guide our deep dive.
Excellent source. Really comprehensive look at the demographics of the country.
Absolutely. And get this, we'll be exploring things like why, even though more baby boys are born, women actually end up outnumbering men as the population ages.
That's right.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
We're going to be using data from the 2021 American Community Survey. And specifically, there's this one chart that shows the difference in the number of men and women
Interesting.
across different age groups. And what I found so interesting is that it's not just like a snapshot in time. It actually shows you how this balance kind of shifts
Right.
throughout our lives.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just have assumptions about, how many men and women there are in different age groups, but when you look at the data, it can be surprising.
Yeah, it's definitely not what I expected.
Yeah.
And so the chart we're looking at, it tracks what's called the cumulative difference. So basically it's showing how the balance tips one way or the other as we move through these different age brackets.
You got it.
And so the first thing that really jumped out at me was that the chart starts out with more men than women.
Right, and it actually shows a pretty significant male majority in those early years. Like around age 44, there are about 3.2 million more men than women in the U.S.
Wow, 3.2 million.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. So is this something that's unique to the U.S., or is this like a global pattern?
It's a global phenomenon. Yeah, most countries see slightly more male births, something like 105 boys for every 100 girls.
Huh.
There are a few biological theories about why that is.
Oh, interesting.
But it's a pretty consistent pattern worldwide.
So it's not just like a random coincidence. We're literally starting life with more males.
Right.
Interesting. But then as we age, things start to shift, right? Like the gap starts to narrow and eventually women actually take the lead.
Yeah.
So what's driving that change?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
It's a complex interplay of factors, biology, lifestyle choices, even societal norms can play a role.
Right.
One thing that's often overlooked, though, is the impact of mortality rates.
Mortality rates. Okay.
So simply put, men tend to die younger than women.
But why is that? I mean, we always hear about men being more likely to work in dangerous jobs, like construction or the military.
Yeah.
So are they just more exposed to risks?
Yeah, occupational hazards definitely play a role, but it's more than just dangerous jobs. Men statistically are less likely to seek medical care, even for routine checkups.
Is that because men are just tougher? Like there's that whole, man up mentality that we hear about?
It might be part of it. Those traditional ideas about masculinity can sometimes prevent men from seeking help when they need it, whether it's for physical or mental health.
And that reluctance to seek help, I mean, that can have serious consequences, right?
Absolutely. For example, the average age for a first heart attack is 65 for men.
65. Wow, that's younger than I would have thought. And for women?
For women, it's 72.
Okay, so a full 7 years later.
Yeah, and this difference really highlights how seeking timely medical care and adopting healthier lifestyles can have a big impact on longevity.
Okay, so it's not just about being tough. It's about being proactive. Interesting. Okay, so back to this chart. It seems like it's in those later years after 65 where we see the most dramatic shift.
Right.
Like women become the clear majority and the gap just keeps widening. as age increases.
Yeah. By age 85, there are 3.3 million more women than men in the U.S.
It's almost like a mirror image of that early male majority that we were talking about.
Yeah.
We start with more men, but ultimately women outnumber men. And it's largely because they're living longer.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating is that it's not just a coincidence.
Right.
Like it's this combination of biological, behavioral, societal factors all working together.
And that's why understanding these demographic trends is so important. It's not just about the numbers themselves. It's about uncovering the why behind them and what it means for our lives and our society.
So we're not just looking at a chart. We're looking at a reflection of how we live, how we age, and how our world is changing.
Exactly.
This is where I think things start to get really interesting.
I agree. We've laid the groundwork. We've seen how the numbers play out. But now I think it's time to dig deeper into what's driving these trends and what it means for all of us.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so before the break, we were talking about how even though more men are born, women end up outnumbering men in the U.S.
Right.
It seems like a paradox, but it all comes down to longevity, right?
Exactly. And when we dig into the reasons behind that longevity gap, it becomes clear that it's not just one single factor. It's a whole web of influences.
Yeah, we talked about how men are less likely to go to the doctor, even when they're dealing with serious health issues. But what about the biological side of things?
Yeah.
Do women just have some kind of built-in advantage when it comes to lifespan?
Well, there's definitely evidence that biology plays a role.
Okay.
For example, there's a growing body of research on the potential protective benefits of estrogen, particularly in relation to cardiovascular health.
So are you saying those XX chromosomes might actually be giving women an edge?
It's a possibility. Some studies suggest that estrogen might offer some protection against heart disease, which is, a leading cause of death for both men and women.
Right.
Of course, more research is needed, but it's a fascinating area of study.
It makes you wonder if there are other biological factors at play that we haven't even discovered yet.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, but it's not all about genes and hormones.
Yeah.
Right? We were talking about how women tend to be more proactive about their health.
Absolutely. Women are more likely to go to the doctor for regular checkups, screenings, preventative care.
Right.
And that proactive approach can help catch potential problems early on when they're often more treatable.
So it's not just about living longer, it's about living healthier.
Exactly. And there's another interesting piece to this puzzle.
Okay.
Social connections.
So.
Women tend to have stronger social networks and support systems. And that can have a profound impact on both mental and physical well-being.
That makes sense. Having people you can rely on can help you get through tough times, reduce stress, and maybe even encourage healthier habits.
Right. It's like having a built-in cheering section for your health.
I like that analogy.
And there's more and more research that supports that link between strong social connections and longevity. So yeah, it seems that having close relationships and feeling like you belong can actually help us live longer, healthier lives.
So it's not just about going to the doctor. It's about cultivating relationships and a sense of community.
Yeah.
That's a powerful message. Okay, so we've got biological factors, health behaviors, social connections. But what about the impact of socioeconomic factors?
Right. We can't ignore that men are still more likely to work in higher risk occupations.
Right.
Which, can contribute to a shorter lifespan.
Yeah. And then you have those traditional ideas about masculinity, the pressure to be tough and stoic.
Exactly.
And that can prevent men from getting help for both physical and mental health issues.
It's like this double whammy for men's health.
Yeah.
They face greater risks at work, and then they're less likely to seek help when they need it.
It's a complex issue, for sure. But at least recognizing these patterns is a starting point, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've talked about why women are living longer. But what are the broader societal impacts of this trend? What happens when women are increasingly outliving men?
That is the big question. And it's something we as a society really need to be thinking about. One area where we see a huge impact is elder care.
Elder care.
As women continue to make up a larger and larger share of the older population, the demand for elder care services that are tailored to their needs is going to keep growing.
So we're not just talking about nursing homes. We're talking about a whole spectrum of support services designed for older women.
Exactly. Everything from health care and housing to social activities and financial planning.
Wow.
And this has implications not just for individuals and families, but for policymakers and businesses too.
It's like a ripple effect. It changes the landscape of our communities and even how we think about aging.
Exactly. And this demographic shift also has a big impact on things like Social Security and retirement programs.
Okay.
As women live longer, they're also drawing from these programs for a longer time.
Makes sense.
Which raises questions about how sustainable these systems are in the long run.
Right.
And whether we need to make adjustments, make sure they're still working for future generations.
It's a good reminder that these aren't just abstract policy issues. They directly affect people's lives.
Right. And we also can't forget the economic side of this.
Hmm.
As the population of older women grows, they become a really powerful consumer force. Businesses need to pay attention to this changing demographic and really try to understand the needs and preferences of older women.
So it's not just about healthcare and social services. It's about recognizing the economic influence of this growing group of women.
Exactly. And it also creates an opportunity for women entrepreneurs and business leaders
Right.
to step up and create new products and services that specifically target this demographic. It's a pretty exciting time to be innovating in this space.
I see a theme emerging here. It's not just about men versus women. It's about recognizing the unique needs and challenges that different groups in our society have,
Absolutely.
and then working towards a more equitable and supportive world for everybody.
I think that's a great point.
We've explored so much in this deep dive.
We have.
But I think the biggest takeaway is that this is really just the start of the conversation.
I agree. We need to keep learning about the factors that affect how long we live and how our population is changing. It's crucial to keep asking those tough questions, challenging our assumptions, and looking for solutions that help everyone live healthier lives.
Well said. This has definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
Me too. Understanding these trends is crucial for planning for the future and for creating a world where everyone has a chance to thrive.
That's a great way to wrap things up. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the shifting gender balance in the U.S. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of knowledge.